if you have access to that now. Okay, so here we go. Parsha Shlach is, of course, about the story with the spies. The Jewish people want to send spies to check out the land of Israel. And Hashem agrees and tells Moshe to send the spies, which he does. And the spies start out as tzaddikim, good people, but unfortunately they become convinced in the course of their journey that this is not a good idea, and it's dangerous, in fact. And they come back and they do give a good report about the land, but they also give a very scary report about the inhabitants, except for Yeshua and Kalev, who of course stayed not to be afraid, and Hashem will be with us, as we'll learn more in detail in the class. Unfortunately, the Jewish people believe the 10 spies, and they decide not to go into Israel. Hashem is very upset with them. At first, he is going to kill them all. Moshe davens, and Hashem says that instead he will have them die out of the desert and have the next generation enter the land of Israel. At that point, the Jews have an about face and they say, hey, we're ready to go. And Moshe says, no, do not go. It's a dangerous venture. Hashem is not with you. And they go anyway, many of them at least, and they are completely wiped out by the Canaanites. And then we have the rest of the parsha talking about some aspects of the sacrifices, talking about the mitzvah of challah, and talking about the mitzvah of tzitzis, also talking about the man who collected sticks in the desert on Shabbos and was put to death. So it's a pretty intense parsha as far as the parshiyas go. But we are going to focus on one specific verse with the Rashi on that verse. And it is in chapter 14, verse 9. And this is when Yeshua and Kalev are trying to convince them to not worry, trust in Hashem, and conquer the land, and everything will be fine. So here's what they say. Ach b'Hashem al timroidu, v'atem al tiru es am ha'aretz, ki lachmenu heim, sor tzilo me'aleim, v'Hashem itanu al tiro. Only you must not rebel against Hashem. Have no fear of the people of the country, for they are our prey. Actually, I just lifted that off of Sefaria and whatever translation they have there. But the Hebrew is ki lachmenu heim, because they are our bread. Okay? Their protection has departed from them, but Hashem is with us. Have no fear of them. Okay, so Rashi has a lot to say on this verse. First of all, Ach b'Hashem al timroidu v'atem al tiru esam ha'aretz. You must not rebel against God, have no fear of the people of the country. So Rashi explains, do not rebel against Hashem, and consequently, you will not have fear of the people of the land. So these are not two separate things that Yeshua and Kalev are saying. They are saying one will follow from the other automatically and naturally. If you're not in a state of rebellion against Hashem, if you trust in Hashem, if you believe in the words of Hashem, then there is nothing to fear, because you know that Hashem will take care of you. Right? Because he doesn't really counter. They don't really counter the claims of the spies. The spies said that they're mighty and we're like grasshoppers in their eyes, and they have fortified cities until the heavens, And in fact, when they decided that they wanted to change their mind and they wanted to go into Israel after the decree was made that they can't, so Moshe said, hey, you can't go. The Amalekim and the Canaanim are right there. You need to say they're too dangerous. What are you, crazy? And in fact, they were absolutely annihilated. So it's a fact that the inhabitants of the land were mighty and powerful, and they don't counter that fact. So how can they say don't be afraid? The answer is al timroidu, don't rebel. Meaning to say, once you accept Hashem as your master, and you accept his words that he has told you through his prophet Moshe, that you should enter the land and you will conquer the land, then there's nothing to be afraid of, because you know Hashem is with you. So those two things, one naturally flows from the other. The next thing they say is kilachmenu heim, because they are our bread. Rashi says noichlem kalechem. In the Hebrew, it's noichlem kalechem. We shall consume them as bread. Now, this interpretation of Rashi has to be understood a little bit, because lechem is often a example of food in general. Bread is considered the staple of life, the staff of life, and so on. Halachically, bread is the main aspect of a meal. Once you make a bracha on bread, you don't have to make a bracha on any other part of the meal foods, that is, foods that you eat during the meal that are connected to the meal, because they are secondary to bread, which is considered the main food. So when the verse says they are our bread, really you could say that means they are our food. We're going to absolutely eat them up. So what does Rashi have to say specifically? Noichlem kalechem. We're going to eat them as bread. We're going to eat them. We're going to destroy them. We're going to finish them off. What's the expression of bread, like bread? So the Rebbe explains that to understand this, we have to look back to last week's Parsha, where we spoke about the difference between the way Hashem gave man to the Jewish people, which was bread, and the way he gave meat to the Jewish people, which was the slug, the quail. As you'll recall, they got the bread in the morning, whereas they got the quail in the evening. And Rashi says that Hashem is saying to the Jewish people, the bread which you asked for rightfully, because you need bread obviously to survive, I'm going to give to you in a good time. Because the morning you have time to prepare your food. Everybody knows the medrash that the man was, it was a miraculous food. You could think whatever you wanted, and it would become that thing. But that was not true for everybody. That was only for tzaddikim. For regular people, the man, in fact, only had one flavor, which was ketzapiches b'dvash, like a wafer and honey. And for some people, for the wicked, in fact, you had to process it. It was not a ready-made food. You had to pound it and bake it and make it edible. And therefore, you need time for that. And that's why it fell in the morning, when there's plenty of time in the day to prepare your food. However, the slav, which was the meat the Jewish people asked for, shaloi kahoige, improperly, because they didn't need meat. First of all, the man, like we said, for many people tasted like whatever they wanted. Second of all, they had plenty of their own meat. They had come out of Egypt with their flocks. They went down into Egypt with their flocks. The Egyptians did not take their flocks from them. So 210 years later, their flocks had grown and grown. And in fact, two of the tribes had so many flocks that they didn't even want to enter the land of Israel. They wanted to stay in Transjordan, where there was plenty of grazing areas, like we read coming up. So that really there was no reason for them to ask for the meat. And because that was not a proper request, that's why Hashem only gave to them at night. That's not really a good time to get your ingredients for your dinner, because you have to get it, you have to shecht it, you have to feather it, you have to salt it, and only then can you cook it, and only then can you eat it. That the whole process takes a few hours, so you can end up eating pretty late at night. And Hashem was kind of telling them, you don't really need this anyway, so I'll give it to you whenever. So that's why the pasuk specifically is referring to bread when it says lachmenu, they are our bread. It doesn't mean food; it means our bread, like Rashi says, because what Yeshua and Kalev were telling to them, is that the way Hashem is going to give us the land of Israel is going to be with a happy, shining face, just like he gave us and it gives us the man in the morning in a good time, with no trouble, easy to take care of and to deal with, and so on. So Hashem is going to happily give you the land of Israel. This is not going to be a trouble for you. This is not going to be difficult for you. This is going to be easy, because Hashem loves you and Hashem wants you to have the land. He's been waiting to give it to you since Abraham, 400 years earlier. So what are you worried about? That is noichlen kalechem. We will eat them like bread. And finally, we have Rashi on the part of the verse that says, Tzilam me'alehem, Sar tzilam me'alehem, which he translates as their protection has departed from them. Let's read the Rashi. I.e., their shield and their strength has departed from them. The virtuous among them are dead. One of them was Job, who had protected them by his righteousness. I don't know where he gets the word one of them from. Let me just check in the original in Rashi. I don't think that's correct. The Hebrew is Meginam v'chaskam k'sheim shebehem meisu Iyov shaya magan aleim. He does not say one of them, so that is a mistake. Iyov was their protection. Iyov was a righteous man. He was a tzaddik, and while he was alive, he was protecting the inhabitants of the land. Now he had passed away, and therefore they did not have that protection. In case you're not sure who Iyov was, he was, of course, the main character of the book of Job, and he was a very righteous man. He's described in the beginning of that book as fearing Hashem, doing no evil, and so on. And of course, he also suffered a lot in his life, as the book tells us. But he was a very high level individual, almost on the level of Avraham Avinu, not quite, but almost. And therefore, as long as he was alive, he was protecting them. Now, when the verse earlier in the Parsha says that they said that it's a land that is oicheles yoshveh, consuming its inhabitants, that's because there were a lot of funerals at that time. Hashem made people die so that the people would be busy burying their dead and not pay attention to the spies. one of those people who died at that time while the spies were spying the land was this Iyov. So that's what they were saying. Sar tzila me'alein, their protection, Iyov, has departed from them. So therefore you have nothing to worry about. Waiting room. We have 718 in the waiting room. Please come in. Okay,
Rabbi, I think you have to mute. You have to mute. You have to mute in the background. Yeah. Mute in the background noise.
Yeah. Who are you? Hello? Not hearing you. Okay. Who else? Mr. Greenberg. Have you been here before? I don't remember. You there? Just trying to get to know everybody. Okay. Feel free to introduce yourselves at any time. So going back to what I was saying, the spies were saying, the two good spies were saying, due to the death of Iyov, there was nothing more for the Jewish people to worry about. Another explanation is the shade protection of the omnipresent has departed from them. The word sail means protection because it means shade. Hashem is our shade, is our protection. And up until that point, Hashem was protecting them because, as you'll recall, when Hashem told Avram that his children are going to get the land of Israel in the Bris Ben Abasarim, in the covenant between the parts, Hashem said, you can't have it now, because the sin of the Amorites has not been completed until now. So they don't deserve to be destroyed at this point. So Hashem was, so to speak, protecting them because they didn't deserve destruction until that point. But now that was over, and it was time for them to be destroyed, as was about to happen. Unfortunately, it didn't happen right away because of the fact that they believed bad spots. But nevertheless, that is the meaning of Sar Tzila Me'aleim according to the second interpretation of Rashi. So now the Rebbe discussed is, why does Rashi have to give two interpretations? We know whenever Rashi gives two interpretations, it means that they are not, that neither one of them is perfect. Because if one of them was perfect, he would just say that one. If the first one was perfect, he would just say that one and not say the second. And if there would be no problem with the second one, he would just say the second one and not the first one. If he says two, it's because each of them is not perfect. But nevertheless, he says the first one first because that fits better into the verse and makes more sense. But the second one still has a certain value that's added over the first. And that's why the second one is mentioned too. So here we come to this Rashi. Let's try to understand what's wrong with the first interpretation versus the second. So, number one, when you speak about Star Tzila Me'aleim, their protection has been removed from them. Normally, the protection is from above. It's not part of the people that are being protected, like something that provides shade. You're down here on the floor, and you have a tent, you have a tree, you have a house, you have something above that is protecting. According to the first interpretation, their sail, their protection, is actually part of them. It's Eov himself. The second interpretation says that it is Hashem. So in terms of the term of protection, shading from above, the second interpretation fits in better to those words, as opposed to the first, which is referring to a protection they had from within themselves. As far as why the second one is not so perfect, here's where we get a little bit Hasidic, a little bit esoteric. So the pasuk says, Hashem tzilcha al yad yeminecha. It's in Psalm 121. Shira males esa inay elaharim ayin yavoy ezri. I lift my voice onto the mountains, from where will my help come? Ezri me'im Hashem oisei shamayim ba'aretz. My help will come from Hashem, the maker of the heavens and earth. Al yiten lamed raglecha al yanam shemrecha. He will not allow your feet to stumble. He will not slumber from guarding you. Hine layan relayishan shomi Yisrael. Hashem neither sleeps nor slumbers, the garden of Israel. Hashem shemrecha, Hashem guards you. Hashem tzilcha, Hashem is your shade, your protection. Ayad yiminecha, on your right side. What exactly is the reason why we call Hashem our protection, specifically using the euphemism of shade? We have other euphemisms for Hashem's protection. For example, sometimes we call Hashem our rock. Hashem tsuri v'goyali, Hashem is our rock and our redeemer. What is the deeper meaning behind saying that Hashem is our shade? So here's where we come to the interpretation of the Baal Shem Tov. Everybody knows that the way you behave is the way your shadow behaves. The word shade and shadow can be one and the same. When you jump, your shadow jumps. You bend down, your shadow bends down. You make funny hand movements, shadow does the same, and so on and so forth. When we say that Hashem is our shadow, what we're saying is that the way we behave, Hashem shadows our behavior. We behave positively, Hashem responds with positivity and kindness and blessing. Unfortunately, if we behave in a manner that we are kind of ignoring Hashem, pretending he doesn't exist, acting as if his wishes are not important, thinking we can just get along without him, well, guess what? Hashem reacts towards us as a shadow does, in the same exact way. Oh, okay, I'm not important. I guess you're not important either. I'm not part of your lives. You're not part of mine. You're not thinking about me. I'm not thinking about you. And so on and so forth. Of course, in a deep way, Hashem always loves us, and Hashem will never reject us. That goes without saying. But in terms of a revealed, loving relationship, Hashem acts towards us the way we act towards him. That's the meaning of Hashem Tzilcha. Hashem is your shadow. And that's why we have some trouble interpreting this verse to be referring to Hashem. Because you have to remember, we're not talking about Jewish people here. In fact, we're not talking about good people here at all. We're talking about Gentiles who were pagan worshipers, who were very morally bankrupt. The Canaanites in particular had very bad behavior, which is exactly why they deserved to be wiped out. So therefore, it's a little bit unusual to say that Hashem is their shadow, as if they deserve reciprocal treatment from Hashem, as if they have this kind of special relationship in which Hashem responds to everything they do. That's really something unique to the Jewish people. Because we are created in the image of Hashem, we are considered to be the children of Hashem, chosen people, and so on, the firstborn son of Hashem, all these descriptions. And therefore, concerning us, it's appropriate to say Hashem is your shadow. When it comes to the other nations, and particularly the wicked ones, that expression does not seem like a correct expression. Now, of course, there is reward and punishment among Gentiles as well. There's no question about it. But it's not in the same way as it is for the Jewish people. The Rebbe explains, for example, when you talk about an animal that does what it's supposed to do, the animal gets rewarded in return. But it's not because the animal is an important being that it deserves the reward. It is rather a natural result of what it's doing. When it's doing what it's supposed to do, we give it more sustenance. We give it more food so it can have more energy to do more of what it's supposed to do. Or we also have the concept of, it's a motivating factor. It's behaving, you give it a little treat, it behaves, continues to behave and do the right thing. So it's just part of getting it to do the right thing. But it's not a reward per se because it's an important being. Similarly, when it comes to punishment, if the animal is not functioning in the way it's supposed to function, so then it stands to reason that it's simply not going to get what it needs because it's not providing the service that it's supposed to provide. The dog is supposed to protect the person. I think I told the story here a few months ago about a dog in Siberia that was a guard dog, and then there was a prisoner who escaped. He threw it some meat, and he distracted it, and the prisoner was able to escape. And when the guard came, he killed the dog. And when the story was over at Mendel Futterfass, who asked the guard later, like, why did he kill the dog? It's so expensive, these guard dogs. So he explained that the whole purpose of the dog is to do the job of not allowing prisoners to escape. And if at the moment of truth, when it was really needed to do what it needed to do, it could not fulfill its function, well, then there's no purpose in having it. So of course I killed it, because it's just a waste. There's no point in feeding and housing and taking care of a dog that's not going to fulfill its very reason for existing. So the same is true of animals as a whole. And that is how the Rebbe explains the concept of reward and punishment, according to the first opinion of Rashi. The second opinion says that yes, that Hashem is their shadow, because they also have a system of reward and punishment that is somewhat similar to that of the Jewish people. Whereas the first opinion says, no, they are more comparable to animals. They don't deserve to have a reciprocal treatment from Hashem. Rather, they are treated the way an animal is treated. You're useful, you get more of the stuff you need to be useful. Not useful? Nah, may as well be deleted or diminished, because you're simply not providing what you're supposed to provide. Welcome, Isaac.
Sorry, hi. Just on my way back from the doctor's.
No worries. So here the Rebbe brings in the opinions of the Rambam and the Ravid to explain these two opinions of Rashi. Again, to review, the first opinion says that the Stor Tzila Me'aleim, the protection that has left them, is Eov. The second opinion is Hashem. Hashem, who was protecting them, is no longer protected because their time has come to be finished off, and therefore Hashem has removed his protection. So we said that the second opinion holds that Hashem treats the Jewish people in a reciprocal manner, like a shadow responds to the person, and that is similar to the system of reward and punishment that the Jewish people have, where Hashem repays us measure for measure, whereas the first opinion says, no, the Gentiles do not have that special type of reciprocal treatment, and rather it's referring to Eov, who was their protection. So this argument can be related to the argument of the Rambam and the Ravid. Listen carefully to this argument. Everybody knows that an animal that is kosher and is shechted, ritually slaughtered, is tahar. It is ritually pure. If you eat it, you do not become impure. If you carry it, you do not become impure. And if you touch it, you do not become impure. It's perfectly kosher and pure. On the other hand, maybe not everybody knows this, a kosher animal that dies and is not shechted is called a nevela, a carcass. And a nevela makes a person tummy. If you touch it, you become tummy. If you carry it, you become tummy. If you eat it, you're automatically carrying it, so that's another story, but you also become tummy. What if a Gentile shechts an animal? He takes a kosher chalaf. A chalaf is the Yiddish word for a shechita knife, and he performs the shechita act in a perfect way. There was a fellow, by the way, a shochet once who came into a Shlach, an abattoir, a slaughterhouse, and he saw another shochet who had a big beard, and he had a head covering and all, and he saw him shechting the animal, and that's it. Nothing else. And he goes over to the shochet and he says, why aren't you checking the lungs? Because in order for an animal to be kosher, in addition to shechting it, you have to take out the lungs, blow them up, and make sure that there's no punctures in them and that they're kosher. And the man said, Rabbi, you're in the wrong section of the abattoir. You're in the halal section. He was a Muslim, what do they call them?
I think it's called halal, the halal.
No, the Muslim cleric.
A killer with a permit. I don't know.
Imam.
No, there's a word for it. The Muslim clerics. What's a Muslim cleric called?
Imam.
Not a priest.
The imam. Yeah.
The imam, exactly. He was the imam, and he had a beard and a head covering like some of them do. And he was doing the halal slaughtering, but he wasn't Jewish. So what's the halacha? Let's say they had a kosher shechita knife, and let's say they shechted in a halachically perfect manner. Is that animal kosher? I mean, it's not kosher for eating, obviously, but is it tahar, ritually pure, or is it tameh, ritually impure?
It'd be tameh. It'd be tameh. It's not
Moshe says it's tameh.
It's not shechted according to the Jewish halachot. It's done according to halal. which
Well, no,
means
but
that,
let's say he did it according to Jewish halachot. Let's say you were watching.
yes, then it would be, yes, then it would be kosher, it would be kosher, yes. Because he knows the samanas, he knows the.
No, because he's a guy.
The knife is
You
sharp enough
can't
to
have
cut
a
it.
guy. You can't have a guy as a shaychet.
Moshe
Period.
says it's tahar, and Isaac says it's not kosher. But these are not contradictions, by the way, because I'm not talking about eating it. It's definitely not kosher for eating. I'm talking about is it an avela? Is it tame? Or is it not tame?
You can have you can teach a computer to do shchita also.
I'm sorry? I can't hear you.
It's an avela.
Isaac says it's an avela. Moshe says it's not. How about a third opinion? One says yes, one says no. Is there a compromise we can reach?
Okay, no.
A
All right,
goy
the
cannot,
compromise is as follows. The Rambam says that it is an avela by rabbinic law, but by Torah law, it is tahar. It is ritually pure.
that's right, that's right, that's right.
That is the words of the Rambam. Now, I want to read to you the words of the Ravid. I didn't get a chance to put it into the handout, but the Ravid has very strong words for the Rambam. You ready? This is censored, by the way. I have to tell Smith to cut it out from the recording. Akum heim kebehemos. Pagans are like animals. Ve'ein metamin. They don't make somebody tame. Ve'ein mitamin. They don't become tame. Am hadoima lachamor. They are a nation that is like donkeys. Hein goyim kemar midli. The Gentiles are like a drop in a bucket. Ve'es kulam yisa ruach. All of them should be blown away by the wind. V'hachoshev oisav leklum. And whoever considers them anything, asaf, which is the Rambam, by the way, because the Rambam just said that their shchita is worth something on a Torah level, and the animal's not in the vela. So he's talking about the Rambam here. V'hachoshev oisav leklum. A person who considers them anything, asaf ruach b'chafnam, has gathered wind, air in his palms. The Rambam gathered air. He accomplished nothing with this ruling because he's absolutely incorrect, says the Rebbe. So what is the deeper root of their argument? Again, the Rambam says that their shechita has some value. On a Torah level, the animal is not considered a carcass, it is tahar. And the Ravid says no. The Ravid says no value whatsoever. What's the basis of their argument? So the Ravid's position is that they are like air. They are like wind. They have no halachic value, no halachic substance, like a donkey. They are not considered in the position of importance in terms of halacha, any different than an animal is. Of course, there are certain halachas that Gentiles have importance, many halachas in terms of, not cheating them, not hurting them, not killing them, God forbid, being honest with them. We also have the concept of you cannot ask a Gentile to do work for you on Shabbos, only with some exceptions. There's many halachas where you can sell your chametz to a Gentile for Pesach. That's a valid transaction, so they're not considered like nothing. But in terms of this halacha, we are not giving them any importance whatsoever. They're like the wind. So what they accomplish with the shechita is the same as the wind would accomplish. If an animal would die through a knife that was blowing in the wind, the animal would not be kosher. So too, because the Gentile is not important in terms of the laws of slaughtering, nothing was accomplished whatsoever, just like the wind. The Rambam, on the other hand, does give some importance to the Gentiles. After all, they are created in the image of Hashem. After all, they were put here in the world for a purpose, to make this world an inhabitable place, so that the Jewish people can make it a godly place. In fact, they are so close to being Jewish that they can become Jewish. You cannot take a donkey and put him in the mikveh and make him Jewish. It doesn't work. You can do it with a Gentile man or woman, of course, in the right way, and so on and so forth. So obviously they have some halachic importance. Now they're not the same as a Jewish person. They can't actually do a full shechita. It's not kosher. It's not tahar on a rabbinic level, but it has some value. So these two opinions are reflected in the two positions of Rashi. The first opinion is that their protection is Eov. Not that Hashem is their shadow, because that represents the view of the Raven. Hashem doesn't shadow them because they don't have the importance that the Jewish people have for them to receive a special response from Hashem. You do this, I do that. You do that, I do the other, back and forth. That's a unique thing that Hashem has with the Jewish people. On the other hand, if they are functioning properly in this world, the way they're supposed to be functioning, well, then they automatically get blessed in a similar way that animals would receive extra sustenance. An animal that is functioning in the right way will be able to continue to do so by getting extra food or whatever it is. So Eov is the tzaddik. It means that that nation is functioning in a high level in terms of making the world a proper place. Well, then it wouldn't have been a time to destroy them. But since Eov had passed away, Sor Tzila Ma'aleim, their protection has gone from them. So therefore, there's nothing stopping them, nothing protecting them from being obliterated. That's all the first interpretation. The second interpretation follows the opinion of the Rambam that the Gentiles have some importance. They were put here to accomplish something. And when they accomplish it, they do receive a reward from Hashem similar to the way the Jewish people do. That's the concept of the shadow. And that's why the second interpretation says that Sar Tzilam is referring to Hashem, who was their protection, was their shadow, and was not going to be doing so anymore from that point. All right. So I've been talking for a long time. Any questions, comments?
If nobody has any questions or comments, you give us a 2-minute wrap up before you sign us off.
I can, yes. So if there's no comments, I assume everybody understands everything I've been saying. Everything is clear, Baruch Hashem. Am I right? Okay, I guess so. So the spies were saying, the good spies were saying to the Jewish people, if you do not rebel against Hashem, you must accept Hashem's word as being absolutely true. Hashem says you're going to conquer the land. There's nothing to fear. Not only are you going to conquer the land, but you're going to consume the inhabitants like bread. Just like the bread, the man was given by Hashem to the Jewish people in a kind way, in a way that was easy for them to deal with. So too Hashem was about to deliver the entire land of the Jewish people and the inhabitants to the Jewish people in a very positive, easy way for them to conquer. And finally, Sor Tzila Me'aleim, in case you were worried that they might have some residual protection, and maybe it's not going to be so simple to destroy them. Finally, the spies said no, they have no protection. They have no protection from within, because their righteous, the one righteous man that they had amongst them, who was Eov, had passed away. How old was Eov when he passed away? I think he lived till 210. If I'm not mistaken, he lived 70 years before the test, and then after the test, he lived another 140 years. If I'm not mistaken, that's explicit in the book of Eov. I have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure. So Eov had already passed away, so they had no protection from within. And as far as protection from without, Hashem was no longer protecting them. Their time was up. Whatever good merit they had in the merit bank was used up. They had sinned excessively, and it was time for them to be wiped out. It's interesting that despite the fact that it was their time, they in the end they got another 40 years because of this sin of the spies. So practically they remained alive, which is interesting because usually a person, you would think a person who needs to be punished, even if the punisher doesn't do it, you would think Hashem would do it anyway. So if they deserve to be obliterated, why should that be postponed just because the Jews had sinned? That's something to think about. But for now, I wish you a good Shabbos, and we'll see you again next week with Hashem's help.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Rebbe.
Rabbi, thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Rabbi.
My pleasure. All the best.